And so the Bible is kind of like a training ground, in a sense, that invites us to learn to see and to trust how God's reality breaks in, how God's kingdom breaks in for us here and now too. Whatever loss we face individually, whatever our world is going through, whatever anxiety or challenge or brokenness are part of our human experience. The Bible trains us to trust in God's big picture, in God's perpetual intentions for us and for each other person and for the human community and for the world. That's what we pray for each week when we pray, "Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven." Maybe you have had a moment like that when the veil is pulled away and when you get a sense of God's reality or God's kingdom shining through in a way that strikes you. One of the leaders at FUMC describes that he senses it when he volunteers and when he sees person after person being treated with dignity. God's reality is close. For a beloved woman at a former church, she sensed God's reality breaking in when she would see the birds and the butterflies feeding outside her window, offering a sense of continuity and steady hope through the seasons of her life. Even when she started to lose her sight, she would cherish the flashes of color that she could see outside, and she would cherish the song of the birds. God's reality is close. For me, a person came to mind who embodied this psalm, someone who invited me to trust God's reality beyond what I could see. I played a lot of soccer growing up, and while I might dismiss it as just a sport, because it is, also in many ways, team sports end up being like a microcosm for the rest of life. People are people, and it was preparing me for that. And one day when we'd had a pretty rough game, people were cranky. Many of us were ready to go home. People said things that maybe weren't too nice to each other. But I remember one man, one of the dads. He had a gentle but a firm demeanor, and he stood on the sideline as we started to leave for the parking lot, and he would say something genuine to each person. "I saw how hard you were playing out there. I'd be upset if someone treated me that way too. Go on now, get some rest." Simple things, but genuine. And as mundane as a high school soccer game might seem, his steady presence was a way of God's kindness shining through in the day-to-day for me. God's reality struck me last week when a little girl who comes here Sunday after Sunday, she shared something out loud for the first time during Time with Wonder. Marcy had been talking about how we can show compassion for other people. And so she asked, she said that one way we can do that is by sitting with someone when we see them eating alone. And this little girl, she chimed in and she said, "Nobody sits alone in my class." A glimpse of God's kingdom. And maybe God's reality was peeking through this week when Polish shop owners waited with diapers and with food to welcome Ukrainian refugees coming across the border. Maybe God's reality was peeking out through them. To return to my opening question, I am pretty sure we can't force peace in ourselves. Clearly, we can't force it in the world. But I wonder if part of our task as a community is to together look for and wait for and be part of God's kingdom breaking in.